Good evening. My name is Rita Hicks, and on behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Houston Area Education Fund, I'd like to welcome you to Public Affairs Public Access. As you know, all of our activities this election season have been geared toward two primary objectives, one of which is making sure as many of you as possible are registered to vote, and then the second is making sure you have all of the information that you need in order to make educated choices when you get to the ballot box. So, with respect to the first issue, just bear in mind that your deadline to register to vote in this November's elections is coming up on Tuesday. So if you haven't had a chance to register to vote, or you're not sure if you're registered to vote, you have just a couple of days left to do that. You can find information about how to register to vote at either the county's website, harrisvotes.com, or votetexas.gov, which is the state's website to assist with voter registration. Also, be sure to check the League of Women Voters website because we have a ton of voter registration events going on all over Houston, and we can help you get registered if you aren't already. With respect to learning about the candidates on your ballot, we've had a couple of conversations with candidates so far. If you missed those and you'd like to take a look at the content, you can visit Houston Media Source's YouTube channel or the League of Women Voters of Houston's Vimeo page to see the conversation we had with the Harris County Department of Education Board of Trustees candidates, and then last week's conversation that we had with the candidates for county attorney. Next week, we will be having a conversation with the candidates for Harris County District Attorney, followed by the Harris County Sheriff the following week. And we will round out our collection of county conversations the last week in October with the conversation with the candidates for Harris County Tax Assessor, Collector, and Voter Registrar. Tonight, the conversation is just a little bit different. No candidates in the studio. Instead, what we hope to do in the next hour is to help you understand all of those races on the ballot that have to do with our judiciary. Lots of courts, lots of candidates. What does it all mean? I have a fantastic panel of experts here to talk to us about it. And for anybody who might like to follow along, if you go to harrisvotes.com, you can actually see a copy of the sample Harris County ballot. Here's what it looks like. You can see it in PDF form, harrisvotes.com. Click on it and you can see what the sample ballot looks like for this November's elections. So let me take just a second to introduce you to the panelists that I have to talk to us tonight. To my left, I have Mr. Alistair Dawson. Alistair is the president-elect of the Houston Bar Association. He's also a very experienced trial lawyer. He's handled a variety of challenging commercial lawsuits, and he's earned widespread praise for clients as a go-to trial lawyer. He's been recognized by Best Lawyers in America for the past 5 years in a row as a commercial litigator, and by Chambers USA from 2005 to 2016 as a leading trial lawyer in Texas. He's also a member of the nationally acclaimed American Board of Trial Advocates. And it was just mentioning that he does some work with our Supreme Court Advisory Committee as well. So very knowledgeable, and here to talk to us today about the Houston Bar Association's resources for voters on the judicial candidates. Next to Alistair, we have Miss Alyssa Pollard, and she is a board member on the Association of Women Attorneys of Houston. She's also a litigator, and she represents a wide array of domestic and foreign companies in a lot of complex commercial dispute issues, everything from contracts, torts, trade secrets. She also does internal investigative work. All of this working as an associate at DLA Piper, where she runs their LATAM Law blog as well. She regularly conducts a lot of different kinds of investigations, a lot of different subject areas, including regulatory, employee misconduct, and anti-corruption policy issues. Thank you, Alyssa, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Next to Alyssa, we have Mr. Ted Wood, and he is an assistant public defender with the Harris County Public Defender's Office in Houston. He's only been in Houston a short time. Before that, he spent 13 years of his career in the Texas Office of Court Administration. So Ted knows his way around our court system in Texas. Before that, he actually served as Randall County Judge from 1995 to 2002, and he worked as a briefing attorney for the 7th Court of Appeals in Amarillo. where he also taught state and federal government classes at Amarillo College. Ted, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Lastly, we have Ms. Wanda Morrow, who is an assistant dean at Houston College of Law. She oversees the college's study abroad program and student organizations. And prior to being named assistant dean, she was the financial aid director and also began her career at the college in the continuing legal education department. Wanda does a tremendous amount of work in Harris County courts in pro bono matters, and so she's here to talk to us a little bit about how that relates as well. Wanda, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, I mentioned at the top of the hour, we have a lot of different kinds of courts on the ballot this election season. So one thing that's interesting about Texas, which is not usual when you look at the 50 states as a whole, is that all of our state judges are elected. Wanda, can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Harris County has a wide variety of courts. We have 59 judicial district courts, we have 4 county civil courts, 15 county criminal courts, and 4 probate courts and 1 county court. Of those, the state courts are the municipal courts, the county, the courts of appeals are the 1st and 14th here in Harris County, and then the Texas Supreme Court is the court of final jurisdiction for civil matters in the state, and the Court of Criminal Appeals hears all of the criminal appeals, and as opposed to going to the Texas Supreme Court. So this year on the ballot for judicial candidates, we have 4 justices for the courts of appeals opened, 24 judicial district court openings, 1 county civil court at law, 1 county criminal court, and 8 justices of the peace courts that have openings there. And each of the courts have their own subject matter, so the family courts oversee family matters, custody issues, child support, modifications, visitation, protective orders, and that sort of thing. The juvenile courts obviously hear juvenile matters, criminal misconduct, delinquency, and that sort of thing. The civil courts decide matters and render judgments on civil matters like malpractice, personal injury, damages, breach of contract, and that sort of civil thing. And then the criminal courts, the district courts hear the felony cases, and the county criminal courts at law hear misdemeanor cases and appeals from the municipal courts, which deal with traffic tickets, basically.
Great, thank you. So Ted, I'm going to have you deep dive on some of those different kinds of courts a little bit for me, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And we'll start with the justices of the peace, because those are the JP courts are the ones that are in every community, and a lot of people have at some point or another been in front of a JP for various reasons. Can you talk about what their function is in the judiciary?
Sure. The justice courts are the court that you're probably the most likely to come before yourself, that and the municipal courts. But let me say a word about municipal courts first. In the city of Houston, the municipal court judges are not elected. They're appointed by the mayor and confirmed by the city council, so you'll never see a municipal court judge on your ballot. As far as the justices of the peace, though, you will see them. And in each county, there's a division into a justice of the peace precinct. In Harris County, there are 8 precincts, and there are 2 judges in each precinct. So that's a total of 16 justices of the peace. 8 of them are up for election in any cycle. So there are 8 justices of the peace running this time around. But you will only vote for 1 of those 8 justices of the peace, because you're only going to vote for the justice of the peace that represents you in your particular district. That's at odds with almost every other position on here, the county courts, the district courts, so on, where you vote for all the judges and they don't represent particular districts within the county. The justice courts, what they do, they have civil jurisdiction and they have criminal jurisdiction. The criminal jurisdiction deals solely with Class C misdemeanors. That's things like speeding tickets and other traffic infractions, also things like minor in possession of alcohol, simple assaults, some of those things. The top fine usually is $500. You're not going to do any jail time for a Class C misdemeanor. On the civil side, the most significant thing that they probably do are what we call forcible entry and detainer cases that have to do with landlord-tenant issues. But they also handle small claims, so small amounts of money, anything up to $10,000. If there's a dispute about that, the justice court is the most likely place for that to be decided.
So a JP candidate anyway is going to be potentially facing a wide variety of different kinds of matters. and at a very local level.
That's right, and I should say that justices of the peace do not have to be lawyers. Now, some are not, and that doesn't necessarily mean that only lawyers can do a good job being a justice of the peace, because we have probably more justices of the peace that are not lawyers than are. But they are elected every 4 years. They serve a 4-year term. They run as Republicans, Democrats, Libertarians, Green Party members, what have you. And they're going to be in the primary elections, which have already passed, of course, and then they're going to run in the general election.
Great. So then the next kind of court that Wanda was mentioning to us are the county courts, and we actually have separate criminal and civil county courts. Can you talk a little bit about the distinction?
Sure, I can. And let me say that, first of all, every one of the 254 counties has a constitutional county court, and the judge, the county judge, serves as the judge of the county court. The smaller the county, the more likely that county judge is actually going to do judicial work. The larger the county, the less likely that's going to happen. And so in the large counties, there have been other county-level courts created by statute as opposed to by the Constitution. And these courts pick up the slack where the county court can't handle it all. In Harris County, we have 24 statutory county courts. 16 handle criminal matters, 4 handle civil matters, and 4 handle probate matters. Most of those county court at law, statutory county court elections happen in the year that we elect the governor. Not this year. We only have 2 of those on the ballot this year. One is for an unexpired term, and one is for a newly created county level court. And in most counties, they don't distinguish between civil cases and civil cases and criminal cases. They just have a county court at law which will hear both. In Harris County, we have the luxury of being able to be specialized. So the criminal county courts at law are going to hear Class A and Class B misdemeanors. And the civil cases, the civil courts at law are going to hear contract matters. They have jurisdiction over all eminent domain cases in Harris County, and they have a jurisdictional limit of $200,000. So anything above $200,000 in controversy, you won't hear it in these courts. And then the final type of county court, statutory county court, is a probate court. They hear mental commitments, guardianship matters, things dealing with estates, but we don't have any of those particular judges on the ballot this time around.
Great. And so then above $200,000, that's where we get to the judicial district courts. Is that right?
Yes, and actually the district court jurisdiction goes down as low as $200, but there's a lot of overlapping jurisdiction, if you will. But yes, on the civil side, the district courts are going to hear the larger cases, the $1 million cases. And on the criminal side, they're going to hear the most serious of the crimes, the felony cases. And again, in most counties, district courts hear both civil and criminal matters. In Harris County, we can be a little more specialized, so we have 3 types of district courts. We have criminal district courts, civil district courts, and family district courts. And the family district courts, everything they hear is divorce and child custody, child protection, adoption, those kind of things. Those are technically civil cases. It's a subset of civil cases. But we have courts in Harris County that hear only those kind of cases. Now, on your ballot this time around, we have 14 positions in the civil courts, 9 positions in the criminal courts, and 1 position in the family courts that are up for election.
Great, thank you. So before we get to the appellate courts, I want to pause here because we're talking about the county courts and the district courts having sort of considerable overlap in subject matter. Can we, and I'll start with you, Alistair, because you're a longtime trial attorney. Can we talk about the kinds of qualities that you're looking for in a judge, either a county judge or a district judge, when you're thinking about who's a good candidate from a judiciary perspective?
Yeah, so I think that to me the #1 quality is someone that's going to follow the law. I mean, that's what judges are supposed to do. They're supposed to follow the law. And then the other thing is to be impartial. to not, favor one side or the other, regardless of whether the judge, agrees or disagrees. They're supposed to be impartial, treat everyone the same, treat everyone respectfully. I think you want a judge that's going to rule, make decisions. And I think, a great judge will, in my judgment, is someone who will make a decision because that's the decision that's called for by the application of the facts in the law, even if he or she doesn't really agree with it. So those are some of the qualities that I think are important, but I think following the law and being impartial are probably two of the most important.
Okay. Anything anybody else would like to add?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. We look to experience. As has been identified, a lot of these courts are specialized courts, either family law, criminal law. So we look to experience either on the bench or as a practitioner in those courts. I think that helps judges know how to make the right rulings and to make them more quickly. And something that maybe voters don't appreciate if you're not in front of these courts a lot is there is kind of a business aspect of it, just the judges in charge of their court and whether they run it efficiently, how quickly cases get heard, how long you're sitting around waiting in the courtroom, and like Alistair said, whether our clients can actually get decisions is a big deal that unfortunately we have to deal with a lot and our clients have to deal with a lot.
Mm-hmm. Anything to add, Ted?
Well, I would just add, piggybacking on what Alistair said about judges who follow the law. Another way to say that is we want judges who are not result-oriented. In other words, they need to follow the law and let the chips fall where they may. And that's the best kind of judge, not one who has a preconceived idea of, I want to find this person guilty or not guilty, or I want to rule for the plaintiff or the defendant, but rather goes in and, again, like I said, just decides it solely on the law.
Okay. Wanda, anything to add?
I don't have anything.
So, we have a mix in Harris County, obviously, of some courts that are highly specialized and some courts that are just very general in nature. Can we talk a little bit about, and we have, on seat and also in the candidate pools, judges with a very wide array of backgrounds. Can we talk about some sort of specific skills that make for a good judge that might have to do with subject matter, but might just be more legal skills acquired? Like, for instance, Alyssa was mentioning, being able to manage a team, being able to manage a docket are important things for a busy judge. Can we talk about what other kinds of skills we're looking for in judges and candidates that wind up making good judges?
Anyone?
Well, one thing that varies a little bit by court is just the number of cases that the judges are expected to hear and the number of cases on their docket. So the JP courts, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head, but I'm always astounded when I hear how many cases they're expected to go through. Or if you go to one of the JP courts for jury duty, or a lot of people may have had experience with those. But all of our courts are pretty busy, so being able to efficiently get through those cases is important. But I think particularly in some of the lower courts, you really have to look to efficiency. We look to whether, if a incumbent, how they've been doing on their docket, and if it's someone who's not one of the incumbents, what their ideas are for making that process more efficient, or what experience they have managing some big logistical challenges.
So I practice mostly in the district courts. Some things that we look for are, for if you're having a hearing, a lot of the district judges will have a docket where they have, 10, 12 matters set in a given hour. And everyone files papers, both sides file papers. And to me, a good judge will have read those papers before the hearing,
right?
Because that makes the hearing so much more efficient. There's some judges, they come out and they've got questions. They've read both sides' materials. They have questions to one side, questions to the other. And then the whole thing is much more efficient, and the judge is able to make a decision. There are other judges, unfortunately, they haven't read the material, so you're having to spend the time. You've already spent the time to, write the papers and submit them to the court. Now you're having to spend the time, educating the judge about what the issue is, and so that's a whole lot less efficient. So I think, being prepared, being willing to make a ruling, having spent the time ahead of time to study what the issues are. I think in what I do, being willing to let people go to trial if they need to go to trial. In the course of my career, there's been judges down there that didn't want to go to trial, which I always thought was strange. Why would you be a trial judge if you didn't want to go to trial? But there have been some over the years, and if to me, it's not the right place for someone who doesn't want to go to trial to be a trial judge. So those are some of the things that I think are important.
Right.
I think also it's important what the attorney's background is, or in the case of JP, whoever is going to run, not necessarily an attorney. But if you're running for a court that is a criminal court, then it's going to be very helpful if you have some background in criminal law and handling those kind of cases. On the other hand, if you're running for a family district court, then hopefully you've had some experience handling divorces and adoptions and those kind of family matters. It doesn't mean that people can't be in the criminal law field and not be a good family judge or vice versa. That can certainly happen. But I think for voters out there who are looking at qualifications, if you can see that somebody's worked in a certain subject area and they want to be a judge in that area, that just makes sense.
Okay. So we've talked about all the JP courts, the county courts, and the district courts we talk about so far are courts of first impression. In other words, that's where a matter lands first. But that's not always where a matter ends. As we all know, there are appellate processes in every kind of court. You see it on Law and Order, so on and so forth. Even if you're not an attorney, you know that sometimes matters are appealed. And we have a couple of layers of appeal in our Texas courts, and the first one is actually the Court of Appeals. So Ted, can you tell us a little bit about the Court of Appeals?
Yes, I'd love to do that. All the courts that we've discussed up to this point are what we call trial courts. And you can have a jury there, and this is the kind of thing that our viewers are probably most familiar with watching on TV, where lawyers are popping up and making objections and the judge is ruling, and there's a bailiff standing there, and the defendant or the people involved are usually in the courtroom. The jurors are there if it's a jury trial. And there's one judge over all these cases. When we go to the Court of Appeals, it's totally different. It's almost entirely a paper process. Sometimes there is a call for oral argument, where a lawyer can get up and argue a case, but there's no witnesses, there's no objections. It's something that the lawyer on appeal is trying to point to errors in the record, in what happened below. And there's usually a panel of judges at the Intermediate Court of Appeals level of 3 at a time, and they will ask questions. This is a process that takes less than an hour, typically. And the person appealing the case, the party appealing the case, goes first. They make an argument, they answer questions. Then the party that was the winner, if you will, at the trial court, they get to respond, and then it goes back to the appellant or the appealing party to have the last word. And the judges don't make the decisions there from the bench. They say, okay, thank you for your arguments. We'll take this under consideration. We'll get back to you. And the product that they get back with is a written opinion that explains either why the lower court, the trial court decision will be affirmed, and they'll show the reasons why, or why it will be reversed or modified in some way. So it's just a very different process. It's a very long process. You could file an appeal today, and maybe it'd be a year before you get an opinion in that case. It's a long, drawn-out deal and a very academic one. The judges do a lot of reading. They typically have to be very good writers so they can explain the basis for their opinion.
So Houston is unusual. We have 2 courts of appeal. We have the First Court of Appeal and the 14th Court of Appeal. And from memory, one of those used to be in Galveston, and they moved it to Houston many, many years ago. So it's, I think, the only city in the state that has 2 courts of appeal. And when the cases come out of the district court, they can go to either one. There's no, they're randomly assigned to either the first or the 14th.
And I'd like to add also that the courts we've talked about up to the courts of appeals, they are county-wide. So when we vote for a district judge, everybody in the county gets to vote for that position, and the person elected will serve the entire county. The justice courts are a little bit different. Like I said, they serve a certain precinct. The Court of Appeals, though, is bigger than just Harris County, and there are 14 of these courts of appeals across the state. And as Alistair said, we have the 1st and the 14th. They both encompass 10 counties, the same 10 counties. Harris County is the biggest one, but we also have Washington County, which is Brenham and Fort Bend County, and other counties that go into this, this group of 10.
Great. And then, of course, the final layer of appellate court in Texas is actually split subject matter again, and Ted can talk us through that, but it's the Supreme Court and the Court of Criminal Appeals.
That's right. Most states have one Supreme Court. There are only 2 states that don't. It's Texas and Oklahoma. And in Texas, we have a 9-member Texas Supreme Court. They're the final word on civil cases. And so that means that they're going to hear all the family cases that go up that high. They're going to go to all juvenile cases actually go to them also. They're not actually criminal cases. And then your more normal civil lawsuits. And there are 9 members of that court. They're elected to 6-year terms, and they meet in Austin. The Court of Criminal Appeals is likewise a group of 9 judges. They're elected statewide, and they're the final word in all criminal cases in Texas.
Thank you very much, Ted. So obviously the appellate courts have a very different job to do than the trial courts. So can we talk about what unique skills it's good to have in appellate judges that sort of make them, you know, good appellate judges that you want to find yourself in front of as an attorney?
I'm not an appellate attorney, but you know, I think it's someone who is smart. I think you know, they're having to look at legal issues and look at prior case law and determine how these legal issues should be determined in accordance with prior case law. And you know, the nuances and, you know, applying precedent to the situation before the court, I mean, that can be tricky at times. So I think they have to be intelligent and hardworking, I think, are to me, the two most important criteria. You know, then again, you want they're going to hopefully follow the law. You see, you know, it's more, I don't know, more often done, but I mean, it's sort of what they're there to do, is to apply the precedent from prior case law to the issue before them. Those are some of my thoughts.
Well, and that's not always an easy job, because when you're looking at precedents, there's almost never going to be quite a perfect fit. So it sounds to me like you're also looking for someone who's highly analytical and sort of thoughtful in figuring out which precedents should govern in a particular factual scenario. And then you might have something that's completely new and different, and you have to figure out what to do in the absence of precedent.
Right.
Well, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
okay.
Ted.
That's absolutely true. And one thing to remember about the appellate courts is that they are writing not just to solve the current case before them, but to give guidance for what the law is from here on out. And so they have to decide whether they want to write a very broad opinion or one that's kind of narrowly tailored to the facts of that particular case. And so it's a good appellate court opinion that is clear, and that people who practice in the trial courts can say, aha, I get it, I understand what they're saying, I understand the law, I can follow that. It's a little less valuable if the opinion is a little bit murky, confusing, and you're not sure how they got there. So, you know, being a very clear writer and writing to your audience, and that audience being people who are going to use this case to try other cases, is very important.
Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, Ted covered it well.
Well, great. Thank you for that, Ted. So before we sort of shift gears and start talking about some resources for vetting the candidates for all of these courts that we've talked about, at the county and district level, the number of them is significant in Harris County. And can we talk about the reasons for that? I think some of it has to do just with the sheer volume of legal work that happens in Harris County. Is that right, Wanda?
I think that's true. We have so many cases that are filed in Harris County, and so I think that you just have to have that to serve our population.
Yeah. And in fact, Ted, you mentioned at least one of these courts is actually a new court that was established presumably to offset some of that increasing caseload in Harris County. Right.
In the last legislative session, the legislature created one new district court in Harris County and one new county level court. And almost every session, without exception, new courts are created. And again, it's back to what you said, it's the sheer volume of cases here. There's a demand for that. And the voters in Harris County have a tougher job than any other county because there are 123 different positions that each voter will vote for in Harris County. Now this time around we've got 37 positions that are open. There will be even more in 2 years. But contrast this with a small rural county in Texas where instead of 60 district courts, there is one. And oftentimes that one district court is shared with 4 or 5 other counties. The judge does what we call ride circuit, which is a term that came from the horseback days when someone had to go from the county seat in County A to a county seat in County B. And so you get out in West Texas and some of these places and everybody knows their district judge. Here, even the attorneys don't know all the district judges. It's just the difference between big cities and small towns.
Well, I certainly know that's true. I was mentioning to Ted yesterday, I'm from Odessa, Texas, and so much smaller. Even growing up, you know who the judges are. I've been practicing in Harris County for 12 years, and I can tell you maybe a third of them. Maybe a third of them, and mostly because I know them personally, not because I've been in front of them in any judicial capacity. So yeah, that's thank you for that. So if you ever wonder why your ballot in Harris County is so huge, it's because we're one of the largest counties in the country, and it takes that many judges to make sure all of the matters that are filed here are handled. So I want to go ahead and shift gears now because the League of Women Voters, it's very important to us to make sure that voters have nonpartisan resources for vetting candidates. The one that the League of Women Voters puts out, of course, as you know, is our voter guide. And we just finished collecting responses from all of the candidates on your ballot this week. And so I anticipate before early voting, we'll have those voter guides out. You can find them in paper, but you can also find them at vote411.org. And that's actually a great tool because, as Ted mentioned, depending on where you live, some of these races are going to change. And so at vote411.org, you can actually search your ballot by zip code. You can go through and look at the information we have for each candidate. You can even select the candidate that you believe you agree with, and at the end, print it out and take it with you. So that's one really quick, easy way to keep up with the candidates on the ballot that you think you agree with. But that's all of the candidates, and what I want to focus on right now is the judicial races in particular, because as we mentioned, there are a ton of them. So, Alistair, I'd like to start with you. One of the nonpartisan resources that Harris County has when it comes to vetting judges is the Houston Bar Association Bar Poll. So can you start first by just letting our viewers at home know what the Houston Bar Association is?
So the Houston Bar Association, or the HBA, is about a 12,000 member organization. They're all attorneys who live in Harris County, who practice here in all different ways. Some are trial lawyers, some are appellate lawyers, some are corporate lawyers, some are criminal lawyers. So they cover sort of the gamut of things that lawyers do. And the HBA, you know, judicial elections are really important. You know, these are the people that apply the law. They enforce the rule of law. They uphold our Constitution. And so we recognize the importance of judicial elections, and we want people to make informed choices. And so what we do is we have 3 different elections, 3 different polls, I should say. Right before the primary, we have a qualification poll where we ask all our members to evaluate the candidates in both parties, the Republican and the Democrat, and any third party that is qualified for the election. And we ask them, is this candidate qualified or not qualified? Those results are published before the primary. Before the main election, the one that's coming up, we have what's called a preference poll. And we ask our members, if you were to vote between this candidate, all the candidates that are on the ballot, who would you select? Who do you think is the right choice to serve as judge in that particular judges? And it's all the district court judges, the county courts, the probate courts, all the courts that are up for election, the appellate courts, and the Texas Supreme Court. And those results came out yesterday, I believe. And they are available on the HBA website, which is hba.org. You can go on there and print those out. And that is a resource that is available to you and tells you at least you know, who the lawyers think is the right choice as between the various candidates that are on the ballot.
Can I get you to talk a little bit more about the difference between these two polls? So starting with the qualification poll, is that a set of questions, or is that just strictly a question of, is this candidate, you know, qualified in the sense that they have jumped through the hoops necessary to become a candidate, or is it qualifications in terms of like vetting their qualifications for a particular court?
Yes, so we actually have three. So let me address the two I've already talked about. So the qualifications poll, which is done in March, is basically at its simplest level: are they qualified to serve as a judge or not qualified to serve as a judge? Not whether they're qualified to be on the ballot, but are they good at what they do, so to speak, or not good at what they do?
Okay.
The preference poll is strictly a preference. Who do you prefer between candidate one or two, or 1, 2, or 3? And then there's a different poll, an evaluation poll that we do in the non-election years, which goes through it then evaluates the sitting judge.
I see.
And they're available on the website as well, and I think a useful source of information where does the judge follow the law? Does the judge treat the litigants appropriately and respectfully? Does the judge, does he or she treat the attorneys respectfully? Are they efficient? Analyzes their level of efficiency. And there are a few other factors where you really get kind of an in-depth analysis of what the litigants or the lawyers think about the individual judges. And in that particular one, we ask our members only to evaluate judges before whom they have appeared. So it's not a popularity contest, or it's not what someone else is, if you've actually appeared before a particular judge, we want you to evaluate, various criteria and give us your input on how well the judge did in various areas. So those three different polls are available, poll results are available on the HBA website.
Okay, so the qualification poll is just strictly, does this person tick the boxes necessary to be a judge? And the evaluation poll sounds like it would be a valuable resource for someone who was trying to vet the incumbent, just to see what the attorneys that appear before them have to say about them. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then the preference poll, I popped on HBA's website today to take a look at it. And essentially what you have is, for each different court, the candidate's name and then a numerical value. So the numerical value, what does that represent? That
represents the number of attorneys who voted for that candidate.
Okay. So just strictly one attorney, one vote. Which candidate do you feel would do a better job?
Or who? Yes, and or who do you prefer as between the candidates?
Okay. Well, and that's a much clearer way to put it, I guess. But
so if you had, we had about 22% of our members vote in this last preference poll. There are different numbers. Because some people don't vote in certain elections. Like I didn't vote in the family elections because I don't know the family judges and I don't know the people who are running against them. So I don't really have an informed judgment on those races because I don't do family work. But so you might see, for example, 1,000 for one candidate and 500 for another candidate. Well, that tells you that of the 1,500 people that voted in that particular race, 1,000 preferred candidate 1 versus candidate 2.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So I'm going to come to you next, Alyssa, so get ready. But before I do, I just wanted to remind everyone at home this is a call-in show, and if you have questions as we're talking through these resources or the different courts, you can call and ask us your questions live right now at 713-807-1794. So, Alyssa, you're here, a board member of the Association of Women Attorneys in Houston. Can you tell our viewers at home what the Association of Women Attorneys is?
Yeah, the AWA is a professional organization here in Houston. We host a number of events throughout the year, including networking events, continuing legal education for attorneys here. And one of the things that we do every year is this, or every election year, is this judicial endorsement. And we also work closely with the AWA Foundation. They provide scholarships for local law students here at all three of the law schools.
Great. So can you talk us through what the process of AWA endorsement of judicial candidates looks like?
Yeah, it's a thorough process, and it's a long process. So we have a screening committee. This year there were 13 attorneys on our screening committee. They represent a really good cross-section of the bar. We have family lawyers, we have one member of the DA's office, and we try and make sure we have a good mix of appellate law, criminal lawyers, and people who have experience in each of these courts that we see on the ballot. So we invite any of the candidates who are running for election to screen with us. We ask that they first submit a written questionnaire. After they do that, they interview with our screening panel, which gives them a chance to actually meet one-on-one with each of the candidates. They ask questions both in the written questionnaire and in person about the candidate's goals, the candidate's approach to the law and to the court, obviously try to get an idea of their temperament, their experience, and overall qualification for the bench. After that, the screening committee makes recommendations. They get together and they make recommendations for each one of the races. And then we have a meeting with all of our members that's open. We have, I think, about 300 members. We had about 150 voting this year, either in person or by proxy. And then we kind of lock ourselves into a room for the evening and we go through each one of the races. The committee presents their recommendation. And a lot of the cases we go with the committee's recommendation, and that's not always the case. So it's a lively discussion. We try and rely on the experience of all of our members, and I think at the end we get to a result that we all feel good about.
So I'm going to walk you through some of those steps just because
Absolutely.
I want to make sure, you know, kind of everyone understands what the process is. But before I do that, can you just let voters at home know where they can find your written judicial recommendations?
Yeah, they're available on our website. It's awahouston.org.
Great, thank you. So, starting with the questionnaire, can you tell me what kinds of questions are presented to the candidates at the sort of written phase of your process?
Yeah, it's about their experience, the reason that they're running for the bench, and any plans that they have, things they want to do consistent with what's being done, things they want to do differently, and I think, you know, focusing primarily on their qualifications.
Okay, and then when you put together your advisory committee, is it on a volunteer basis, or do you seek out particular kinds of attorneys to fill those slots, or is it a combination?
It's a combination. It's definitely on a volunteer basis. It's a huge time commitment to meet each one of these candidates. So we definitely have to have willing participants, but we do look at the mix of the overall committee, and we definitely try and balance out the committee so that they have different aspects of the practice represented. Some people are surprised to hear it's not all women on our committee, so we have some male attorneys on the committee as well. A lot of the people on the committee have been practicing for quite a while. We have some younger lawyers as well. We try and make sure that there are a lot of different viewpoints that are represented there.
Great. And then after you've had a chance to go through all of the questionnaires, can you talk a little bit about what that interview process is like for the candidates?
Yeah, it's usually in the evenings. We try and we have a lot of times available given the number of candidates, and we try and work with them. These candidates have a lot going on. A lot of them are, you know, either practicing attorneys or on the bench. We try and make time to see everyone, and so for a couple weeks, usually every evening, they go through and meet for about 20 minutes, which each of the candidates go through their questionnaire and ask them follow-up questions. And then after that, then we go to the meeting with the whole membership of the AWA.
Great. And then, so the meeting of the whole membership, you have your committee, obviously, that's been doing a tremendous amount of legwork, and then they present recommendations. And then what does that meeting process look like? Is it, you know, strictly voting, or is there a lot of conversation that happens, or is it a mix?
There's a lot of conversation that happens. Like I said, we have a great committee. We typically go with their recommendation. It's a very well-considered recommendation. But there are times that people will have other ideas. We always open it up for conversations with the membership. One of the keys to this process is that the process, the actual meeting itself, the content of the meeting and the discussions that are had are completely confidential. And we think that that has allowed us to get really good endorsements. It allows people to make really candid comments and share their experiences in a way that they, you know, wouldn't feel comfortable if it was an opinion that they necessarily had to share with everyone. Because we all continue to represent clients in these courts. That's a key part of the process for us, but we've been doing that for years, and it's allowed us to keep, I think, the quality of our endorsements very high.
Great. So you've gone through this very detailed process, which you know, for a lot of good reasons is a confidential one. Once you settle on who your recommendations are, what information do you publish about those decisions?
All we publish is the race and the person that we're endorsing for that race. And like I said, for reasons we keep pretty much everything else confidential. We hope that people understand enough about the process that they understand that it is a valuable endorsement. It's a well-respected endorsement. But other than that, we don't share a lot of information. We encourage people, if they want additional information, to look to the judicial polls put out by the HBA committee. We encourage them to go to the League of Women Voters Guide. But at the end of the day, we understand that it's just not possible a lot of the times for every voter to go and educate themselves on every one of these races, and most voters don't have experience in these courts, you know, maybe not any of them, let alone all of them. Even as a practicing attorney, I look to the endorsements because, like people were mentioning earlier, we don't have experience in each one of these courts. I don't practice in family law, and so I rely on the experience of the other members of the AWA for those endorsements.
Right. And I just wanted to mention, coming back to the bar poll for a second, Alistair, there's no identifying information for the participating attorneys in HBA's poll either, is that correct?
Identifying in...
In other words, like, so you're not asking attorneys to put the name on the ballot that they vote for.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, no.
It's ours, anonymous.
Yeah, ours are completely anonymous. It's run by an organization, I think it's called like Ballot Box, and you have two options. You can fill in a handwritten poll and send that in, or you can do it via the website, which is, I think, the vast majority is done by website, and you're given a login and a password, and all that's confidential. We don't actually have anything to, we don't see any of the results. It's all done by a third party, and so it's completely anonymous, completely confidential, which, we encourage people to do that because, as Alyssa says, if you appear in front of a judge and you don't have a high opinion of that judge, you don't want that judge to ever know that. If you're going to vote, in essence, vote against a judge, that you want to have confidentiality and anonymity. So yeah, we maintain that as well. And then no one ever knows who voted for what in our elections.
Great, thank you. So the one way in which the League of Women Voters information differs considerably is we're talking about resources where practicing attorneys familiar with the courts on your ballot are providing their opinions, having vetted the candidates and or been in front of them at court and then said, this is who we prefer. With the League of Women Voters, it's actually the other way around. We provide a questionnaire to each candidate on your ballot, and what we publish is exactly what they send us, spelling errors and all. So whereas here you've got some sort of third-party information about the qualifications of those candidates, what you have from the League of Women Voters as a complement is exactly what they have to say about themselves. So, and we try to make that as easy as possible for the reasons that we've been describing, which is, the ballot is huge, voters aren't necessarily familiar with the different positions on it, and we're trying to make it as easy as possible for you to learn who you agree with and who you don't, so you can vote in all of these races. So, I'm at a table of 4 very busy people, and I would like, if you don't mind, to talk a little bit about the resources that you look to in order to educate yourselves on the races that you're not particularly familiar with. Can we start with you, Wanda?
Sure. I utilize all of these. I look at the opinions of my colleagues. I look at the qualifications that the candidates put forth, and just try to make the best decision I can based on their viewpoints and how they merge with mine, so that I can make an informed decision. But as Alyssa said, it's impossible. You don't know all of the judges. I would never want to just go and make a straight party ticket. That's not how I roll. So I just want to try to make the best decision I can, so that it's going to benefit all of us who have to appear before these judges.
Great. And what about you, Ted?
I just echo what was just said. I look to the League of Women Voters publication a lot to try and find out about the candidates. And I do that not only in judicial races, but on the other races. So I think that's incredibly important, and it sounds like what the Association of Women Attorneys is putting out is another very good source. I did want to say one thing about the straight ticket voting. That's not how I roll either. I like to go through and vote for every single race, but I realize there are a lot of races, and on my personal ballot coming up this November, there are 49 different races, 37 judicial races. And I was curious today about how many people do straight ticket voting, and I looked back at the presidential election in 2012 in Harris County, and it was 70% of the voters vote a straight ticket. Now, obviously, voters, you can do whatever you want to, but I did want to give you this nugget. If you cast a straight ticket vote and you do nothing else, and it's a straight ticket Democratic vote, then every Democrat on the ballot will get your vote. If it's a straight Republican vote, every Republican will get it. But you do have this option. You can straight party vote, but then go in on individual races and say, I really care about this race, and I want to vote for, say I pulled a Republican lever for all Republicans, I want to vote for the Democrat in this race, or I want to vote for the Libertarian in this race. You can do that, and that individual vote will override your straight party vote. So that might be something to bear in mind if you as a voter don't feel you can vote in all 49 or 50 of the races, but you want to pick and choose some of them.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, when you're making a straight ticket vote, you're voting for a judge or in a judicial election, and you don't even know who you're voting for, and you don't know if that's the right candidate for the or, the most qualified candidate for the job or not. And we are one of only 7 states that allows partisan election of judges. We have tried for at least 20 years to reform our system of electing judges, and there's no reform on the horizon. So I encourage people to make informed choices. And you think about it, justice is not, there's not Republican justice and Democratic justice or Libertarian justice. There's just justice. And it's not supposed to be partisan. But that's the system that we've got. And, we're stuck with it. And, in the rural counties, as we mentioned earlier, people know the judge and they know whether he or she's doing a good job, or they know who's challenging, and they can make an informed choice. It's hard in Harris County, and I forget what the studies are, that those that do go down ballot, they get what they call ballot fatigue, and they invariably don't get to the end because there's so many races. And guess who's at the end? The judicial elections. Right. And so I encourage people to make informed choices. Whether it doesn't matter to me whether it's one side of the ballot or whether Republican or Democrat or otherwise. And I think the AWA is a great resource and one that I use. One of the things that I do, and I encourage my friends to do, is I send an email out to everyone I know in Houston who's not a lawyer and say, these elections are really important. Make an informed choice. Here's who I recommend. And I give them a slate that usually is on both sides of the ballot, Republican and Democrat. And I use the AWA and as one of the resources that I look at, and the Bar Poll. The Chronicle makes their endorsements. They interview the candidates and they come out with their endorsements. And there are a number of other organizations that have endorsements out there. I'm not as familiar with some of the others, but there are resources out there if you're inclined to do the work, and I wish more people would.
And I should just mention for viewers at home that the judicial endorsements done by the Houston Chronicle are also a nonpartisan resource for you. So, and Alyssa, I wanted to get to you with the same question.
Well, it sounds really convenient, but actually the Chronicle, the HBA Poll, and the League of Women Voter Guides are my go-to. And on behalf of the AWA, we see this endorsement as a service that we can provide to the community, but we haven't taken a stand on the right way to elect judges, or the right way to put judges on the bench, whether it's electing or appointing or anything else. But we just want to offer people a chance to do the best that they can do in the system we have. But, personally, I do think that you see a lot of very odd results as one of the only states that both elects basically all of our judges and allows straight party or straight ticket voting. And so anything people can do to educate themselves, whether it's talking to their friends, going to these resources, is great. And there's a lot of races that people are excited to vote on higher up on the ticket, but these are really important, and especially when you find yourselves in one of these courts, you're going to hope that you have a really good judge.
So what will happen in big cities is occasionally you have sweeps. So in 1994, before 1994, the Democrats had all the seats in the courthouse, the district court. And in 94, there was a Republican sweep. And all those Democrats, many of whom were great judges, and they lost their job through no fault of their own, just because the political winds changed. And we saw the same thing in 2008. They were all Republicans, and when President Obama was elected, many, if not all, I think, of the Republicans who were up that year lost to Democrats. And sweeps, whether you're on one side or the other, are not good, in my judgment.
Yeah, all but two, I think.
Right.
Well, I want to thank so much my panel for spending time with us tonight and helping the League of Women Voters educate voters about the judicial races on their ballot. If you happened to miss us live, don't worry. In the next couple of days, we'll be posting this video on the Houston Media Source YouTube page and also on the League of Women Voters Vimeo channel. Don't forget, next week we'll be back again with another candidate conversation with the candidates for Harris County District Attorney, followed by Harris County Sheriff the week after, and Harris County Tax Assessor Collector the week after that. Be watching vote411.org for updated information about the candidates that are on your ballot. If you haven't registered to vote, remember you've got till next Tuesday to do it. And thank you so much for spending your Thursday night with us. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Houston, I'm Rita Hicks. Good night.
Thank you.